is gender or sexuality really a choice? And I think this really comes down to, can I understand somebody else's perspective? Can I walk in another person's high heels, for example? Um, if we realize that we can't actually fully experience another person's perspective and another person's way of life, how can we possibly truly understand whether somebody is telling us a truth or a lie? And, I always go back to this idea that if one person told me something, and I was like, well, I don't know your perspective, but I can understand that you have your own perspective. But now 10% of the population says, I have a certain feeling, I have a certain understanding of myself. And I may understand that you don't understand this experience and you don't understand this perspective because you aren't me. But I'm telling you that this is my truth and this is my understanding of who I am. And who is it for another person to vilify or negate that perspective? I think that is basically what hinges on the trans debate, the queer debate in a lot of ways. I like to say, one of my favorite podcasters, Dan Savage, he has this podcast called Love, Savage Love. And one of the things that he talks about is um, sexuality and about how, a gay man or a lesbian woman, their attraction is to what society would deem to be, you know, not the norm, because the norm, for the most part, you would say is heterosexual. But obviously, a large percentage of the population of the world uh, views themselves as, homoerotic, like they are women who love women or men who love men. And I guess his point was to say that, um, he obviously has sex with his husband, and lots of women have sex with their wives, and goes back to this idea, if they're having sex, and if sexuality is a choice, that we are all supposed to be heterosexual. And then it comes down to, well, if you're supposed to be this, but I know that in my own story that I am not attracted to the same sex. In my case, I am, but it kind of comes down to this idea of, if you can choose it, that means try to choose the opposite. So Dan Savage's story was, go to a straight guy and say to them, if you think it's something about choice, then try to choose the opposite of what you're attracted to. So his line was something along the lines of, go and suck a dick to this guy, a straight guy. And most straight men would raise their arms and run the other way if that was the choice. Obviously, it is not a choice. And a gay guy who likes to do that is obviously not choosing to like it, they are just liking it. And that is something that they don't really feel like they have a choice in. Similarly, gender. Nobody would go through a gender transition if it was a choice. That's what it comes down to, really. I would never have gone through all the pain, all the everything, if I could choose not to. It was a matter of survival. It was a matter of, if I don't do this, I won't be here. So, is it a choice? The obvious answer, it is not a choice. I would never have chosen to do it if I could choose not to. If I could have chosen to stay as a straight white male, that would have been the far, far easier path. Instead of being vilified, instead of being ostracized, instead of becoming the minority and one that is being attacked in all over the world, it feels like. It's very dangerous to be a trans woman. Maybe not so much in Canada, but more and more in the United States and all over the world. I talk to a lot of people, and it is a scary time to be in part of the LGBTQ. So you can choose to transition. That is a choice. What that transition looks like is a choice. You may stay closeted if you're a trans woman and never show yourself. And I have a lot of people I've talked to that have chosen not to transition for a myriad of reasons. Sometimes it's just plain fear. Sometimes it's circumstantial. Sometimes they feel like they're too old, even though they can never be too old. But the reasons why somebody chooses not to transition, that's a personal choice. You don't get to choose your gender. You do get to choose whether you transition or not. So, is it a choice? Obviously not. It is absolutely not a choice. Neither your sexuality nor your gender. And it really comes down to understanding somebody else's perspective. I wouldn't lie about it. Why would I do this to myself if I could choose? And I guess this really kind of also speaks to this idea of the difference between gender and sexuality. For some reason, people think these two things are the same thing, when actually they are obviously not the same thing. So, gender. Am I a boy? Am I a girl? Am I something in between? Am I not a gender at all? Gender is a construct. If you lived on an island by yourself, what gender would you be? If you never met another human being, would you have a gender? Or would you just exist? Do you shave as a boy or a girl? Do you wake up as a boy or a girl? Do you sleep as one? It's that's absolutely preposterous. So obviously, it's a social construct. So that is one part of it. Sexuality, who you're attracted to, what kind of genitals you want to stick your face into, or what kind of person are you attracted to? That's sexuality. And obviously, these two things are kind of the same thing in the way that they are absolutely different, but also they are kind of they are linked in a lot of ways. For the cis het population, a large majority of them are they don't have to change their gender. They're not choosing to transition because they don't need to. They just happen to be lucky and they got assigned the right gender at birth. And their sexuality just happens to be the norm in society. So they don't have to feel like they need to actually do anything about it. All the gay men and all the lesbian women out there that had to do something about it and had to fight social conventions because they weren't attracted to the opposite gender. And trying to force yourself to be attracted to a gender that you're not attracted to is next to impossible. I'll tell you for sure. I could not be attracted to men no matter what I tried to do. Um, but I had to change my gender. So therein lies the trans experience. Is I had no choice but to do this. I could choose whether I wanted to transition or not, but the reality is I couldn't choose my gender. I just happened to be able to choose to transition. So with that, do you choose the gender or sexuality?